Breaking developments in the firestorm surrounding Ohio Republican Congressman Max Miller, who is accused of committing acts of domestic violence against his ex-wife and their young daughter, which he denies. Tonight, he says he is staying in his re-election race. And we're hearing from President Trump on the shocking allegations.
I'm not getting out of this race, and I'm winning in November, and I'll be back in the 120th. Thank you all. God bless you.
Congressman Max Miller is under growing scrutiny after a restraining order was filed Thursday by his ex-wife, Emily Moreno, the daughter of GOP Senator Bernie Moreno. The filing alleges Miller physically grabbed one of Moreno's attorneys at a court hearing this week. It marks the latest turn in a bitter custody battle after the couple divorced last year. In court filings, Moreno accused Miller of throwing hot water on her, holding a gun to her head, and physically abusing her in front of their 2-year-old daughter. According to a police report, their daughter suffered a broken collarbone in February. Child Protective Services noted that while the injury is common in children, she had a bruise that, quote, appears to be a handprint and appears to have been inflicted. No charges were filed. Miller has denied hurting the child and his ex-wife. He sued Emily Moreno for defamation.
And if these accusations were true, I would be in jail. I would be.
A spokesperson for Emily Moreno released a statement saying, in part, it is shameful that Max Miller decided to go on a bizarre and lie-filled rant about his ex-wife to desperately try to save his political career. Senator Bernie Moreno also releasing a statement on X saying, in part, his former son-in-law should not serve in the House of Representatives, adding he is a danger to my daughter and I hold my breath every minute he has custody of my granddaughter. President Donald Trump asked about the controversy aboard Air Force One today on his way back to Washington, D.C.
There's been some domestic abuse allegations against Congressman Max Miller.
I just learned about it.
He should resign.
Well, I'm going to look at it. I mean, so far it's accusations. I'll be looking at it.
Members of the Democratic Women's Caucus are now demanding an ethics investigation, calling the accusations deeply disturbing, and Congress can't ignore them. Miller has been an ally of President Trump and worked in his first administration. Some polls indicate that his race could be more competitive this fall in light of these allegations.